Well, I want to welcome everybody. My name is Tony Rivenbarth, Executive Director of the Thalia Hall Center for Performing Arts, and we're delighted to have you here today. This is so exciting to us. This is a term in the theater, the front curtain. It's called the main rag. And in some ways, this is a piece of cloth, like a shroud of Turin, that keeps disappearing and coming back, disappearing. And you'll see that little bit of history, but it was painted for the opening night of the theater in 1858. And then it hung in the theater, and then the changes to the theater, and they were going to refix it, and then it sort of disappeared from view. And then in 1932, they found it here, but this was the library in the storage room. And then it sort of disappeared, and then it sort of appeared on the stage in 1938, and then it was taken down during the PWA renovation of the building. Then it came back with 10 feet missing in 1947. Then it sort of disappeared. I'm sure it just got rolled up in the corner. Then it came out again with Doug Swink in 1963, and he photographed it. And then it disappeared again. And then in 79, I had just been hired, and I had that slide of that 63 picture, showing it on the stage. And I said, what a shame it lasted 100 years, and now it's gone. And Juanita Dominic, who was president of Thalia Association at that time, came to me. She said, well, I don't know if that's what we've got, but we had this old curtain in the garage at our house. We'll bring it down. And we unrolled it, and sure enough, there was the curtain. And it's been here ever since, and it's been on display since 1990 downstairs. So at the end of the day, or at the end of our talk today, I hope you'll go down and take a look at it. You'll certainly have more appreciation, as we have, from having a chance to talk to Mr. Rowland this morning about this curtain and Russell Smith and the extraordinary career he had. But without further ado, it's my pleasure. Thank you for all coming. Such a great crowd. We're so pleased. David B. Rowland, is Chief Financial Officer of the Shelton Hill Savings Bank in Abington, Pennsylvania, and is a graduate of Bucknell University and received his master's degree at the University of Pennsylvania Bell Center of Government. But apart from that, he is very involved in history and archives and the preservation of history, and is associated with the Abington Presbyterian Church, the Abraham Lincoln Foundation, the Union League of Philadelphia, the Jamestown Lyceum, the Union Library Company of Hillsborough, but most widely is known for his involvement in the present board of the Old York Road Historic Society. And under his direction, he published 5 books on that part of Pennsylvania. He's curated 5 art exhibitions highlighting the work of Russell Smith and his family of painters, and has continued to do research and write about the Smith family. And Rhonda Zimmer was past president of the Board of Trustees, got stuck in her house one day and couldn't leave, and got on the internet and found this gentleman. And we have so many questions that we've had for years have been somewhat answered today. It's just been thrilling. So we've had a lot of fun. And with no further ado, we'd like to present to you David B. Rowland.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. If the question is the shroud real? Yes, it is. So what I would like to do today is go over the Smith family for you. Russell Smith and his wife and both their children were all painters. You're interested in Russell primarily because of the curtain, but you'll probably also recognize some of the work of at least the son Xanthus, who was famous for his Civil War naval battle scene paintings that were done after the Civil War. So what I'll do is we'll go through the family, and then I think what we'll do is go back and then re-examine Russell Smith and the information we have on him and the curtains that he's done. This is an 1850s picture of Russell Smith. He was born in Scotland. His parents came to this country in 1819 when he was 7. They eventually settled in the Pittsburgh area, and it was apparently a very cultured family. because all the children got together under the leadership of the Smith children and formed a thespian group called the Valiant Society of Pittsburgh. And they did plays, which was the first, so it was the first theater in the town of Pittsburgh, it was pre-oil then, so it was sort of a backwater way out west. And Russell, because he was sort of a diminutive kid, sickly, he was described as, he always suffered throughout his entire life from migraine headaches. He would often play the female role, and he then got into painting the curtains for the sets. In 1833, Francis Courtney Weymouth brings Mr. Booth west to do a production in Pittsburgh, and the person who did the theater curtains was not up to par, and they looked around and found Russell. And Russell painted the curtains. Weymouth was so impressed that he hired him on the spot to continue to paint curtains for him. And by 1835, he will move Russell Smith to Philadelphia for his Walnut Street Theater, which continues today, to paint the curtains there. Russell will then travel up and down the East Coast, painting curtains as his main career. This is an early scene in Pittsburgh. He painted a lot of pictures in Pittsburgh from the early 1830s. This is the main bridge that went across the Monongahela River. This is the oldest house in Pittsburgh in 1832, still standing. The painting was done in 1835. And just to give you a sense of how he puts his paintings together, he often made sketches. One of the things that Russell and all the members of his family will do is they will study nature. They will go out every day and sketch if they're not painting. And they usually start their works with a pencil sketch. This is the Walnut Street Prison. This is his original sketch when he was in Philadelphia of that. There's the finished painting. So you can see the relationship there. So he'll add figures to make the street scenes enlivened. Most of his paintings are not full of people, but there's people in the picture to give you a sense of the scale, and also to give you a sense of man in the natural world, in this case in the cityscape world. Russell Smith in 1836 will travel down to Washington and Baltimore. This is the Capitol building in 1836 for Mr. Eliot's garden. Mr. Eliot was where Russell spent his time whilst in D.C. He also painted in both the middle 1830s and late 1830s on various trips down to Washington. Historic sites, including, this is the original tomb for George Washington. And it was around this time that Mount Vernon was also in a dilapidated state, which he also painted. He will then come back and paint the tomb after it is rebuilt. So this is around the time when the Ladies Association, I forget the full name, bought Mount Vernon and started the restoration. And people saw this tomb as the tomb for the great George Washington and thought it was a little unacceptable, and so a new tomb will be built for the first president and founder of the country. Russell will also often go around to historic scenes, the Brandywine Valley, where the Battle of Brandywine was fought, Revolutionary War scenes that are important in American history, and he will paint those scenes. He'll sketch them and then put them into paintings. In 1838, Russell marries his wife, Mary Priscilla Wilson. He is back from Boston, having done work up there. He marries her. She is from Philadelphia, introduced by one of Russell's uncles who ran the school where Mary was the star pupil. They will marry in 38. They will have their first son, Xanthus, in 1839. And then Russell will decide to retire out of Center City, Philadelphia. He notes in one of his journals that he was fortunate enough to pull his money out. This is before FDIC. He pulls his money out of the Second Bank of the United States 15 days before it collapses. And in those days, when the bank collapsed, you lost all your money in the bank. So he pulls his money out to buy a place. It's still within the confines of Philadelphia, but as you can tell from this painting, a very much more bucolic setting, and builds the house which you can see up on the left, just the corner of Rock Hill. He will live with his family here on this nice property until the mid-1850s. One of the things Russell does is he decides, so curtain painting was not considered a fine art. The fine art, the highest form of painting is to paint oil paintings. And so Russell wants to move from doing these theater curtains that have set him up very well financially into doing the fine art and to do landscape painting. He comes out here to Rock Hill and does that. He still will continue during the 1840s every now and then to do theater curtains, but the economy takes a sag as a result of that bank collapse. And so he will then also find work doing lecture illustrations. So if I'm a professor, I mean, most of the people got their education back in the day by going around to various lectures and hearing people talk on various topics. In order to illustrate those lectures, he would do curtains, miniature curtains, maybe 6 by 9 feet. And a professor would order maybe 10 of them. And as he goes through his talk, again, we don't have PowerPoint, we don't have slide projectors, none of this. So the way that lectures are illustrated are by these curtains that, you pull the string and the curtain drops, and the professor talks about the next picture in front of everybody. So he gets into that business, and then the other thing he does in the 1840s is he goes around, this is the back of Rock Hill, he goes around with some of the geological expeditions that the state governments are sponsoring to go out into the country and find what the natural resources are, where the rivers are, where do they go. And so he works with the Roger brothers to do geological expeditions both throughout Virginia, which then also encompassed West Virginia, as well as Pennsylvania. And so he'll take these long trips and go out. This is the James River in Virginia, based on sketches he made when he was in the field. This is another painting, the Cascade Falls near the Kanawha River in what's now West Virginia. By the late 1840s, Russell Smith decides to travel north. And this is really before the Hudson River School becomes the Hudson River School. And Russell Smith's sensibility is a little before the Hudson River School sensibility of this sort of voluminous sort of landscape. And this is a painting from 1848 up in New Hampshire. He makes his first trip up in 1847, and then will go back any number of times to continue to sketch. The first letter back to his wife talks about how difficult the trip was to get there, but also about how wonderful the scenery was and how he's never really seen anything like it. So he continues to paint. He continues to paint for well-to-do clients in Philadelphia. He has a gallery that handles his artwork for him, and he, moves his career forward in the professional form of landscape painting. He also, from the late 1830s on, is exhibiting with the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and it's sort of breakaway before they rejoined again the Artist Fund Society of Philadelphia. So he's involved with other artists in Philadelphia. We were talking this morning, his wedding portraits. The tradition was when you got married, you would have wedding portraits done. James Reed Lambton did Russell's portrait, and Rembrandt Peale, a good friend of the family, does Mary Priscilla Wilson's portrait, and then the family has those two portraits hanging. He studied with Lambton in Pittsburgh early on. He will work for Charles Willson Peale in his museum in Philadelphia, and then he'll be good friends with many of the artists that started Philadelphia in the 1830s, Sartain, the Peales, Sully, Nagel, all these great, what we know as early American portrait painters. In 1851-52, Russell decides to pack up the family. Xanthus was born in 39. Mary comes along 3 years later in 1842. And when she's 9 years old and Xanthus he's 12, Russell decides that what he really needs to do is go to Europe for an extended 2-year trip and to look at art collections and to paint and study the landscape. They will go to England, to Wales, to Scotland. They'll pass through France, and then they'll spend time in Italy. This is a painting in Italy. This is another one, Civitavecchia, on the coast. And this is a convent looking towards the Apennines. So he does, and what's sort of weird about PowerPoint and you seeing this large on a screen, this painting is probably 8 by 10. Okay, so most of the pictures you've seen, this would be an exhibition-sized painting, so 24 by 36 or 36 by 48. So larger, that would go in a nice frame that you would put at the Pennsylvania Academy for a show. All those paintings started out as first very small pencil sketches, and then to an oil study, and then to a much larger finished picture. And he sort of kept all these pictures. It was sort of like you have all your photo albums, and if you need to go back to something, you can find it. Well, he kept everything as all these. This is oil on paper, so he could have a whole bunch of these in. I've seen his list for what's in what box, right? All these pictures are in this box, so he could go through his library and pull out a scene and then be able to paint it for you if you were so inclined. Russell gets back from Europe in 1852. He's a little distressed with the encroaching city. And it's pretty funny because sort of everybody in Philadelphia is always worried about the cities out to get them, and so let's head for the suburbs. And so in 1854, they decide to buy ground in what becomes what is Montgomery County, near the town of Glenside, present-day Glenside, if you're on Google Maps or something. And he buys an 8-acre parcel at the crown of the hill and builds a house. They sell this property to the Rock Hill property gets sold to Charles Wharton, the brother of Joseph Wharton, where the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania comes from. And the house gets knocked down, and the Smiths move to Edge Hill. He continues to paint there in 1855, and then in 1856, as they're building the new American Academy of Music in Philadelphia, which is known today as the Academy of Music of Philadelphia, the board approaches him and says, "We'd like you to do the drop curtain." Russell agrees, and so he gets himself back into the curtain business, and he will remain in the curtain business almost up until about 3 or 4 years before he dies. And he will both then do landscape painting as well as curtain painting. This is the 12 by 18 oil study for the original drop curtain at the Academy of Music. And it's a lovely piece. It's based on Lake Como in Italy. And really, the color hues, and you'll see other curtain pictures later, the color hues and all are very evocative of most of the curtains he did, and also of the colors that would have been in the curtain that you have had it not been worn, right? Because the curtain downstairs is still worn. Russell buys ground in central Pennsylvania. He will go back and forth to Pittsburgh for the rest of his life. This is a scene in the Alleghenies. This is up in central Pennsylvania, near Catawissa. He buys a place called Pine Creek, where you can retreat to study nature and to paint. This is local to where I used to live, or live, in Huntington Valley. It's Hallowell's Meadow. And this is right behind where his house was. It's a view of Edge Hill Road. And you can tell that he's got a great sense for, he loves to paint trees. When hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sketches of trees, and sort of the personality of the tree comes through in sort of everything he does. This is a later self-portrait of him. And this is the house. This is the house. 1854-55, the square turret goes up. And it's an interesting story about the form of the house, because because it matches a building that he saw in Marseille, France, on one of his trips. But his initial plan was to buy land, knock trees down, and buy more land. Well, as soon as he buys the land, the neighbors, sensing that there's a demand for their property, the prices go through the roof. And Russell says, I'll get around that. We'll just build up. So he's ordered his windows for the house that he's designed, and then he has to redesign the house utilizing the windows that he has in order to give himself the view that he wants. And so that's where we get this 4-story turret, basically, that he builds for the house. A couple years later, he'll build the wing on it, the stone part of the wing, and then maybe 15 years later, the wooden part that's got the sloped roof in the back that you really can't see. He builds a separate painting building in order to handle the curtains that he's doing, most of them being 30 by 30 feet or up to 50 feet wide. So that building is built specifically for the curtain painting. The room with the arched windows to the right here, that is an interior view of that. He's boarded up the arched window behind his easel, and he's getting light from the opposite side of the room. But the whole house was sort of decked out this way, floor-to-ceiling paintings. And it gives you a love to do portraiture. So that's a little nutshell of Russell Smith. His wife was Mary Priscilla Wilson. She was very bright. She translated French and Latin, and there's a couple published works by her in various magazines of her French translations of various poems and short stories. That is a picture of her in middle age. And she then primarily became known as a painter of flowers. This is a hibiscus. I'll just give you a couple of examples. Roses. This is a piece of moss. And to give you a sense of how detailed she was, that piece you're looking at is about 4 inches high and 6 inches wide in the top and the side. So, I mean, you sort of need a magnifying glass to see all the detail. It's really quite incredible. Her 2 children will study under her, so their style will not be near as atmospheric as Russell's. They will be much more detail-oriented. Xanthus, the son, this is an early shot of him. Homeschooled and home-trained as a painter. The Fruits of the 4th of July, which is a very small painting again. Another small painting of a local scene, no more than 7 by 9. He seems to paint every leaf, so Russell is not painting every leaf. Russell's much more atmospheric than this. This is a view from the castle looking towards the town. Xanthus winds up as captain's clerk to Captain Corbin in the United States Navy during World War II. He will serve aboard the Wabash, and he will be he will be under DuPont. He was on DuPont's flagship, I believe. And he will, throughout the war, make sketches of naval scenes. In fact, the military will use him. He'll do detailed drawings of if a gunshot hit a metal monitor, he'll go in and he'll draw what the damage was, and then that will get attached to the reports to go back to Washington. So they definitely used his artistic abilities. This is the Wabash. Unfortunately, the painting needs to get rid of that bad level of orange. That's the ship. After the Civil War, he comes back and he continues to exhibit at the Pennsylvania Academy and then go out and do landscape painting like his father. Given that we've just passed the 150th anniversary of Gettysburg in 1866, he and his sister go out to Gettysburg, and this is a picture of Little Round Top as it was at the time. And it looks like at the bottom somebody's pulling off a souvenir cannon or something. In 1866, 1867, Xanthus gets a commission to do a large-scale ship painting for the Tradesmen's Bank. And they want the painting, it's like 4 feet by 6 feet. And he's never done anything so big, but he does the commission, and he does it to great review. And his dealer, James Earl in Philadelphia, says, you can do the large things, you can do them well, people love them, let's do naval battle scenes. And so the first one he does, which is in the Union League of Philadelphia's collection, is this painting of the Battle of the Merrimack and Monitor. And what Xanthus will do with his knowledge and of people in the Navy is he will send letters out to all the participants saying, here's my sketch, make any adjustments so that I can get the most accurate picture I can. And so throughout his life he will tweak and revise his paintings of these major Civil War engagements as he's in communication with the participants that were involved. This is another painting at the Union League that he does for the Centennial Exposition, which they have to put a big rope around because of the, quote, press of the crowd was so great. This is the Alabama being sunk by the Kearsarge off the coast of Cherbourg in France. And I guess being entree point here for all the blockade runners. Everybody should know the Alabama. Unfortunately, and for, I couldn't pass this up. This is a 6 by 10 foot painting, and this is the final assault on Fort Fisher. Admiral David Porter's bombardment of the fort before the Marines assaulted. This is hanging at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and the frame, to give you a sense, is a good 12 or 14-inch frame around that. As a 10-foot wide painting, obviously, would be. This is a picture, a photo. So later in life, Xanthus becomes interested in photography. He will also sign on to a number of publication efforts related to the Civil War. When the Century Company publishes the Battles and Leaders of the Civil War in the 1890s, he will do a whole series of black and white illustrations for that publication. He also writes and illustrates photography articles. This is one of the photos he took at Edge Hill. And then in the 1870s, he goes up to Mount Desert for the summers, and by 1905, he will buy land on Bailey Island, which had been named as just below Brunswick out on the coast. And that's a picture of Xanthus sort of haired like his father later in life. And then the youngest member of the family was Mary Russell Smith. She died she died very young. There's a picture of her. She always raised chicks and hens and little animals, and so she became famous for her paintings of said chicks and hens. This is Clucking Chicks. This is Chicks and Plums. The largest painting is this one, 24 by 36. She never did larger. Most of her paintings are this size, and they're about 10 by 12. They're wonderful little pictures. She also has, it's interesting, she also has this sort of Sir Edwin Landseer streak of the natural world and the violence therein. And here we have a painting called Struggle for a Lizard, where these two chicks are, you feel sorry for the poor guy. You see the other lizard getting carried on. The yellow chick won that one. And this one is Interruption of the Feast. So this possum is coming in on the rabbits who are a little bug-eyed at the fact that their treats are about to be spoiled. And this is the Unwelcome Visitors. A bunch of hornets after the chicks. So it's not all glowingly, sweet little hens and chicks. There's a little bit of the element of nature. And there's one painting that I've seen, and it's a Civil War related, I forget the title, but it's actually a weasel with dead chicks and the blood all over it. And it's very much about the Civil War and the evil of that. They were very abolitionist, this fans. So, on to theater curtains, which I think is probably why you all showed up. Other than someone bribed you with free desserts in the back. These are sketches from 1840 of a series of curtains that Russell did for the theater in Pittsburgh. So again, from 1840 to 1851, he's doing some theater work, but not a lot. And then when he starts with that Academy of Music project in 55, 56, including your curtain in 58, he will, through 1892, be working on curtains throughout his life. So these are some sketches of his very early things. Over on the table, I put a display out, and I believe the first two horizontal things, starting on the right, are from the 1830s. So they would be the earliest sketches that I have of his theater curtain work. And then the rest, most of the rest are from the 1850s to 1870s, after he's back from Europe and then doing this, not full-time, but throughout his career. These are a series of sketches from the 1850s. Always wonderful tree elements, always classical buildings in it, many times for drop curtains with water and boats, usually some sort of port feel. You can see the building in the lower right looks much like his house, which was again modeled on something he saw in Marseille. We're back to the Academy. He not only did the drop curtain for the Academy, but he also did some of the set curtains. And this is the garden set drop that he did for the Academy of Music also in 1856-57, with an evening view, much different tonality. But nonetheless, you can tell that it's very soft. But you've got your classical turreted building in the background, you have your statuary, you've got your urn. We were saying it was like find Waldo. It's like you have to find the urn in a Russell Smith drop curtain. This is from 1858. This is the time period that your curtain was done. Yeah. This is a painting from 1862. This is The Tempest, Scene 1, Act 1, sorry, from 1864. So even during the Civil War, he's doing theater curtains. As your theater knows, the entertainment never stopped during the war. And these are sketches from 1870. And these sketches are no more than 3 inches tall, 4 inches wide, most of them 2 by 3, very small sketches. Again, they're blown up thanks to PowerPoint and the magic of digital. But they're exceedingly detailed, and we were talking about how just a couple flicks of the wrist with a pencil and he can communicate so much, whereas I think most of us try to do this without more than watch. In 1871, he does a curtain for the Francesca da Rimini, the opera. And this is the sketch for that drop. Again, you can wonderfully warm pastel colors going on in the background to give that wonderful atmosphere, and then some sort of architectural element, but in nature. I mean, you don't get the sense that you're not within nature when you look at these scenes. One of the things I found in my research was the fact that, and I actually thought it was the real thing until I found out, is that the theater in Wilmington, Delaware, in 1871 had commissioned Russell Smith to do a drop curtain. And when I first talked to the people there, I thought it was the real curtain, and then I found out that they had based it on a painting. So they reconstructed the curtain that would have hung there when they restored the theater in the 1870s. In my sketchbook, I have the original pencil sketch, which is the top picture, and you can see the artist's interpretation of that, I'll call it, because it wasn't an exact copy, when they recreated the drop curtain in Wilmington. And there's the recreated drop curtain hanging in the Grand Opera House in Wilmington, Delaware. That's another picture of the painting room. This was put in here to say around this time he builds that back building in order to do the curtains. We found an excerpt from his writings, and basically you went into that room sort of at the 20-foot level. You'd go up some steps and you'd be on a platform, which was the floor, but the floor would have a cut through it, and then you'd have the whole curtain in front of you on a pulley system, so that Russell could stand there and the curtain could be raised and lowered. You're wondering, how do I paint a 30 by 30 foot curtain? This is how. You stand in one place and the curtain comes to you. The other thing he had was he had a series of poles up to 15 feet long, and at the end of which was attached charcoal. And so he could have 15 feet of the curtain show, take these charcoal poles, and sketch in his scene. And they said he was as delft at 15 feet away as that he was right in front of him from all the years of doing these curtains. This is an 1880 curtain. I think it was Diocletian's garden was the theme for it. And we do have urns. This is a sketch for the Academy of Music for another curtain. It's got the measurements in there. I think it's like 50 by 45 feet or something. There. Let's see if I have this. 54 by 43. So 43 in height and 54 wide would have been this curtain. This is an unfinished sketch, but beautiful colors. This is a Spanish street scene from 1888. And then when I organized all these shows in 1998 around the Smith family, we were fortunate to uncover, still in the rafters of the Smith Castle, 2 drop curtains 30 by 30 feet long and wide, 30 by 30. And we had at the high school an installation of those curtains as part of the exhibitions that we organized. So this is a series of pictures showing the curtain being lugged over to where it's going to be installed. The 3 men that it took in forklifts to hoist it up. It was wrapped on 6-inch PVC piping, and then you can see it as it starts to unroll. And there it is unrolled. And then what we did is we edited the bottom of the curtain. We got the border up and rested it on a display cabinet for the trophies, so that you saw the main piece of the picture across. Beautiful colors. And then it's resting in a trough. We had a special trough built so that the curtain hung over the roll. When you do the toilet paper, over. So it hung over, and then it rested in a trough that had even weight all the way across it. Not the same idea as what you have downstairs, where you've got the whole curtain sort of sandwiched all the way across, so that it's all hanging at even full weight all the way across the width of the material. These are a couple of pictures that we had taken of the curtain professionally. This is 1892. I did a little more research at the Archives of American Art on the way down here in Washington on Monday, and discovered that this curtain was actually meant for the Chestnut Street Opera House, but they rejected it and used another curtain. And Russell always kept a curtain or 2 on hand in case someone needed it in a press. And so that's why this curtain was in the rafters of the barn, and the Smiths never bothered to take it when they left in the 50s. And the family that lived there up until the 90s, when this came out of the barn, just thought it was extra canvas rolled up. And then when they were about to leave, they rolled it out on the lawn, and it's like, oops, we have a curtain. So it's in beautiful condition. Here's sort of a big picture of it to give you a sense. This is the other curtain that was found, and that was also installed in the same location. And then we had, there was also a 10-foot wide, I'm not quite sure what it was, a runner. You can see it in the middle here on the left photo. So it was these 3 curtains that were found at the castle that we had a conservator come in, and they were all laid out all at once, and so these are pictures from that to assess them. And then that brings us to your curtain. And there's a wonderful photograph of it, the whole width. And that's sort of square on, but missing the sides. And one of the great thrills that I decided to wait until I came down, I was tempted to tell Rana multiple times, but I kept biting my tongue, is that I found a sketch in my sketchbook of your curtain. Yay! So here's the original sketch of the Wilmington, North Carolina curtain. You can see it written down in the lower corner, drop for Wilmington, NC, 29 in the width, 23 in the height. Was it painted August 1858? So if we take, and of course I'm not really very good at computer graphics, and I will leave it to people here that better are. There's a sort of a blow up of it. So you can recognize that, yeah? And so I tried to impose the one upon the other. So now your canvas actually goes the full width. I used the picture that was square on because I'm not very good at taking a picture that was shot at a 45-degree angle and in Photoshop making it square. I can't do that. But this is anyway the one imposed on the other. So you're missing the pediment for the building, and then you're missing the tops of the trees. And it looks like either a statue or maybe an urn on the top of that white column that's there. Where's Waldo urn? So anyway, I thought that was great fun to have found that for you. And I think that's it.